Welcome to a bonus optimal game state. Right now we're in the middle of a Warcry extravaganza. The upcoming White Dwarf will have rules for the four missing Bladeborn warbands from Nethermaze. We saw an early preview from the French Warhammer community with new profiles for the City of Sigmar release. And now we have rules for the new Blacktalons box. While I'm doing my best to try cover other games on this channel, it does look like in the short term I'm going to need to double down on some Warcry content just to keep up. So today we're getting a bonus episode and I'm going to go through the Blacktalons warband. This is a pretty unique warband of just 5 fighters. It's currently up for pre-order and due for release on the 11th of November and costs £45, €60 or $75. This isn't actually the first arrival of the Blacktalons. Their leader, Neeve Blacktalon, first appeared during the Blight War back in 2017. She had a nice model and had her background expanded out a little bit with the book Blacktalon First Mark in 2018. I suspect there were a few short stories as well. That often seems to happen. And now there's another book upcoming. More recently, she has her own series on Warhammer TV. So it is 6 episodes of about 20 to 25 minutes. So it's essentially a small movie of about 2 hours. It's from this tale that we get the characters of this new box set. They do make for an interesting mix of characters, even if for our Stormcast they are mostly different variants. So we have Neeve, who is a Knight Zephyros, a swift ranger with 2 hand axes. We have Shakana, a Vanguard Raptor with a Hurricane Crossbow and Aether Wing. Rostus is an Annihilator with Meteoric Grandhammer. And I think Hendrik is a older Knight Zephyros, perhaps passing legacy on to Neeve, while Lorai is an Idanet Deepkin Tidecaster. Looking at the plots, we've got some pretty expensive fighters, but everyone over 150 points. This is a full warband, even though it's only 5 models, so we're expecting a lot from every fighter here. Rostus and Neeve are notable, as the 10 average damage is actually where the Order fighters cap out. Rossus in particular looks like he's at the step of his points bracket, so he's probably the cheapest 10 average damage fighter Order have. Lorai does look like she's got an impressive range attack, with Shakana and Hendrik looking, well, kind of average right now. When it comes to wounds, everyone is looking about right for their points. Lorai as an elf is a little bit low, but not at the bottom of her points cost. Neeve, despite being chunky, is actually a little low, but that's just because she's very, very expensive. As a unique twist, this warband acts a little like a Bladeborn one, as the fighters are all actually unique characters. This means you can only have one of each in your warband. We don't have anything mentioned about narrative rules though, so unlike the Bladeborn, you can take Neeve and her friends and go into the Gnarlwood, power them up, or watch them die, depending on the whims of the dice gods. This warband has a reaction called Shield of Azir. This can be triggered after they are targeted, but before dice are rolled. It will turn 2 crits from the attack into hits. That's pretty good if you're close to death, but we're expecting these fighters to be pretty chunky. That said, your opponent's damage will be going somewhere, and if all the damage goes into Lorai, for example, then it might be worthwhile spending some actions to try save her. As a kicker, if it's Neeve using the ability, and she has one of her other Stormcast near, as a kicker, if it's Neeve using the ability and she has any of her other Stormcast near her, then it is 3 crits reduced to hits rather than 2. This would make the Kill the Leader mission incredibly hard for your opponent. Let's start with Neeve herself. She is a massive 285 points. For that, you are getting a chunky 30 wounds along with 5 toughness. You get an amazing 7 move, which makes her super fast. She has 2 attack profiles, a fantastic melee one, and a decent range one. Being able to do 3 damage at range 10 is pretty nice, but for 2 actions, she's still able to move up to anyone within 8 inches and then do 10 damage. So the bow is a nice touch and can be handy, but you really want to get her into melee. She does have ability unique to her, but it is a quad, so you can't really rely on it. The ability list for this warband is actually pretty slim. Everyone gets a reaction and one other and only one other ability, so you're going to be relying on universals a lot. The quad here is called Wind Rider and can only be used if Neeve has just killed an enemy. You can then remove her from the battlefield and place her anywhere you want. The only limitation is she must be more than 6 inches from enemy fighters, but each point of value on the ability reduces that by 1. This means a quad 5 or 6 will put her in melee range of another target. This is a super interesting ability, but typically you'll find yourself using the quad on Rampage instead, Rampage, of course, has been errated to limit the bonus move to the value of the dice, but once you make contact, you are getting a bonus attack. That said, a board-wide teleport is going to be useful for a ton of victory conditions. Overall, Neeve is very, very good. Although she is expensive, she is going to be a nightmare to kill and she hits like a truck. That she's doing it with move 7 makes her a pretty reliable problem solver. So I think we could expect to see her in as an ally in other warbands. The next fighter to look at is Hendrik, the Silver Wolf. This fighter is about half the price of Neeve, half the damage, half the speed, but still great toughness and wounds. Despite the comparison to Neeve, this is actually an impressive fighter with wounds that you would expect over 200 points. The damage is great, although you could see similar on cheaper fighters. What's very interesting with this fighter is him having two melee weapons. It does look like a pretty straightforward check, where if you're attacking toughness 3 or lower, you go with the extra dice, and if you're after a toughness 4 or more target, you go with the strength 5 option. Still a nice touch. It is a beautiful model, and the profile is decent. Where he shines though is with his ability. That particular skull with a star rune mark is the champion rune mark. This lets him use Storm of Justice as a double, giving a visible Blacktalon within the range of the ability a bonus move for attack. Neeve with 7 move and 10 damage can get a lot of work done with that. Pushing back up to 200 points, we have Rosta's Oxenhammer. We've already seen the slow moving annihilators are super popular. Now, Rostas is a little bit more expensive than a 145 point annihilator, but he's doing 10 damage rather than 7 and does have, crucially, 4 move. He loses the reach, but I still think he's got a lot going for him. His wounds are just over what he expects for 200, and with that 6 toughness, most fighters are going to struggle to damage him. Like Hendrik, he does have the champion rune mark, which lets him use Storm of Justice. Rostas is actually a fine target himself, but if he uses it, he has to target someone else, so we can expect Neeve to do a lot of the work. Last out of the Stormcast, we have Shakana Goldenblade. From the initial plot, she didn't look particularly impressive. She has a similar base profile to the others, 4 move, 5 toughness, and 25 wounds. All these Stormcast are going to be hard to kill. Her melee attack profile is relatively poor for her points. 4 is decent, but not for 180 points. Hendrix is already doing over 5 damage for 155 points. Given that, it's surprising that the range attack is only averaging out around 2 damage. Yes, it is range 15, but we'd expect a little bit more punch for it. We do find that bonus damage with the triple headshot. This is unique to Shakana and adds the value of the ability to the hit and crit of the next range attack. A triple one will increase the damage very slightly, going from an average of 2 to 4. A triple 3 will bring the average up to 6, while a triple 6 will max out the damage to an impressive 10. This can be an interesting fighter, but almost completely relies on access to a good value triple to get work done. That said, the option to drop 10 damage from 15 range could be game winning. Last up we have Lorai, Child of the Abyss. The only non-Stormcast in this warband, and it is an Idenite Deepkin. Again, she is quite chunky. Her wounds are about right for her points. She does have toughness 3, making her the weak link in this warband, but also has 5 move and fly to keep her mobile. She does have a classic knife melee attack, but it's obviously secondary to her range 7 blast. That's doing an average of 5 damage. Again, we're seeing a fighter here who can basically do 10 damage to anyone within 7 inches. Where Neeve is running up and hitting one of the axe, Lorai gets to stand and double attack. In the last video, I looked at making some custom profiles for the heroes from the village of Frugelhofen. In that, I felt I had to justify myself when I gave the elf Rialta Snow a range attack doing 4 average damage. Now, that was at 15 range, but she was 16 wounds and costing 185 points. I do think Lorai's attack here is actually quite amazing. She's the cheapest fighter with a range attack doing 5 or more damage, and the fighters she's comparing to are typically Kradron overlords with 3 move. Her unique ability is a triple Nebulous Sea Fog. This removes 1 attack by enemy fighters within 6 inches of her. She has a nice scenic base, which is nice and big. Probably a 40mm base. If so, we're looking at a 13.5-inch diameter bubble. It does mean that keeping Lorai relatively central to the fight would be good, but once the ability has been triggered, it's going to be a lot harder to kill her then. In total, this warband comes to 980 points with no options. Everyone is as equipped, and each fighter can only be taken once. For a match game, you may be able to spend those spare 20 points on a blessing, but options are quite limited as all but Lorai are considered elite fighters. Looking at allies is tricky. It's a lot easier to get an expensive ally than it is a cheap one. Often you're looking at Bladeborn fighters, but that typically comes at the cost of an expensive leader. Unfortunately, Order doesn't have any trolls, something that I hope we will see addressed in future. The special nature of this warband makes things even trickier, as you can't really flex points around. All you can do is drop a fighter and hope that gives you enough. So, for example, dropping Lorai and Shakana is going to give you 260 points to work with. The go-to Bladeborn warband for Order has been the Starblood Stalkers. For 260 points, you can get Kixitaka, Huachi, Tok, and Zepik, which brings the warband from 5 fighters to 7 fighters. Something like that might be worth it, but maybe not. We're due to see 2 new Order Bladeborn warbands in the upcoming White Dwarf, with Hexbane Hunters and the Shadeborn. We should also keep those in mind. But what I'm finding here is often we're dropping a really high quality fighter and we're ending up replacing them with 2, which is an improvement in numbers, but maybe not that much. Overall, this is a very flavorful warband with some really powerful fighters. It is a very elite warband, as it's only got to 5, and it has a very narrow set of abilities. But they are all great. This box is more expensive than a normal warband, and you do get fewer fighters, but they are packed with character. You don't get any fighter cards, but you can print out your own using a Warcry card creator. I've linked some pre-completed cards in the description. I do find it notable that GW have taken the time to make Warcry rules for Age of Sigmar models. Normally the path just goes one way. Underworld's warbands get Warcry rules. Warcry warbands get Age of Sigmar rules. The reality, of course, is that plenty of people are happy where they are playing with Warcry. As I mentioned, we are due to see profiles for new City of Sigmar models, and maybe we'll see more Warcry rules for the recent releases like Seraphon and the Orcs. It is wonderful to see these new models enter the game, and I am really hopeful that we do see more in the future.
Thanks for making it all the way to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Each week I put up a new video talking about one of Games Workshop's specialist games. The goal is always to try and make the best possible two-player experience. If this is something you'd find interesting, please subscribe to the channel and comment to let me know what you'd like to see in future.